Bung Pod. Welcome back, Wine Wonder Boy.
And we got Jazzy J. Jazzy!
What is a bung?
The hole of the barrel is called a bung hole. Inside the bung hole is called a bung. Wine with mayhem. That's what it's about. All right, welcome back to the Bung Pod. It's your boy Ian King, aka Wine Wonder Boy, and I got my co-host with me, Jazzy J. Say what's up.
Hey.
If you like this podcast, please rate us 5 stars if you can on any platform that you're watching this on. Come follow us, talk to us at Official Bung Pod on all social media platforms, and catch the visual podcast on YouTube at Official Bung Pod as well. So we have an awesome guest today. I'm very excited. He's a huge influence in my early on wine career. I used to listen to podcasts with him on it constantly when I was just learning. He is a sommelier, Oregon winemaker, dope merch creator. I'm rocking it right now. Bone Thugs and Burgundy. He's an author, 99 Bottles, YouTube Bon Appetit, World of Wine host, which now went international, which is amazing. Owner and founder of Ann Sons Hospitality Group, and his wine lists are listed on the Wall Street Journal, Huffington Post, and Black Enterprise. And he's also just a badass motherfucker. Please welcome Andre Mack.
Yay,
Hey,
yay.
Andre.
Boom, boom, boom.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Yeah. We're gonna put the air horns in post. Thanks for joining us, man. You've been gracious enough to send us a bottle of the new Noir. Yeah. So I've been following your career for a while. You have Maison Noir, which, and it was it previously Mouton Noir as well? Or
Yeah, so I started a company in 2007. And so, Mouton Noir was kind of like a nickname that I was given when I came to New York. Just all playful in a way. I considered myself the black sheep within the 4 walls of the restaurant.
Mhm.
I was probably one of the few people who had worked at the French Laundry and came to New York to work at Per Se. So I think there were a lot of New Yorkers that came to, they came and trained there, but, they didn't work there. And so, for me, it was just like, I just did things my way within those 4 walls, and, it was a black sheep. And then, looking macro, like, there's not a lot of people that do what I do that look like me. And so for me, it was all about just leaning into that. Right.
So,
and so like, talk to
just
me.
a quick question. Is this the Mouton? In your book, you had nicknames and you eventually gave your staff nicknames as well. Is that what it's?
Yeah,
that was
totally.
Mouton, right?
Yeah. So there was a name. And so it's funny because, we do a pre-shift meeting at the beginning of each shift. And, I'll talk about wines and, wines and styles and highlight producers. And we were talking about Robert Bialy, which is a California producer that makes Syrah. And Vince Zinfandel. And this particular Zinfandel was actually called the Black Chicken. And it was kind of an homage to during Prohibition time when people would come to the farm and buy stuff. And then they would say, let me get a black chicken, which was like they gave them booze and wine. And so that was that started the whole kind of joke. And everybody was like, oh, they should be called the Black Chicken. And everybody's trying to make up names. I was like, hell no. And then, people were playing around. And then finally, when I said, well, we should call you Black Sheep. And then someone said, oh, Mouton Noir. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, okay. And then I designed the logo that's on the back. Well, not on that box, but I designed the logo, and that was my screensaver. And that was it. And then I just joked, all the time. Like I just talked about like that T-shirt, like Bone Thugs and all of that happened at work. Decanting, a Magnum of it costs $45,000, right? I was always joking, like, oh, I'm gonna make this wine. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that, and that was it. And it was just all like in fun. And then finally, when I came to like leave, I was like, I'm gonna just name it Mouton Noir. This is what I'm gonna do.
Hell yeah.
But lo and behold, what happens is that you realize is that in the real world, when you're grown up, the liquor business is pretty litigious, right? So next thing you know, I'm getting sued by Mouton Rothschild. I'm in this legal battle where they serve me.
Oh,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
Back and forth. I mean, it was almost, 6 years, 5 years, something like that.
Wow.
And what you realize is that only the attorneys get paid. And this is stupid. And when you really understand the game, it's big bank, take little bank. right? Like they have so much money that they would just bleed me dry. And so I was like, fuck it, I'll just change the name, but I'm not signing any paperwork, because they try to do that to set precedent, right? So they're like, oh, we protected our trademark, we set precedent. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And so I just changed the name and we just kind of moved on. And so now it's called Maison Noir Wines. And it's so funny because a lot of my distributors, they protest and they still have it listed as Mouton Noir.
Mouton, yeah.
And so, so it had that thing, but it was a nickname that I just kind of ran with. And it's that thing that, like, I feel like we have all felt like black sheeps, out, misfits, outcast, all of those things.
Yeah.
Like we didn't fit in. And for me, I tell people, like, you should lean into that and embrace that, right? Because that's what makes us all different, especially in a world where everybody is conforming, everybody is the same. It's that whole saying is like, they laugh at me because I'm different and I laugh at them because they're all the same.
Yeah.
Right.
And that for me was like, do you, and that's going to set you apart in the world. And that's kind of the approach that I took with wine. And like, when you name, I didn't name my wine Chateau Andre Mack or some bullshit like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Because to me, it's like, what the fuck does that mean to anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like, okay, like it gave me creative license to do things differently. Right. And so that was it. So by naming a wine Love Drunk, that sparks some type of emotion or thought process or feeling in someone. And that's what wine is about. It's an emotional thing. And so to me, that's why I was like, oh, so I'll just name them these names and things that like mean something to me or could mean anything to anybody else. And to me, that's what made wine fun. And that was always been the mission for me, was like, how to make wine, accessible to everyone. And even like in those four walls of the restaurant, like think about it, it's like 2004. We're at the number one restaurant in the wine. I'm doing the pre-shift meeting, and I describe a wine as bang it. It's like, this wine is bang. The staff is looking around like, can he say that? Right? I'm not talking. Everybody's looking around like, who the fuck says that? Who's this guy? Right? And that was it. And I think for me, it made me, relatable to the staff. It made wine relatable, the way to be able to talk about it in a way that wasn't stodgy and wasn't funny. And obviously I could talk about wine at many different levels, right? The Wall Street guy that comes in and wants to do the fucking, the wine smackdown, right? I could do that too.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
But ideally, for me, it was always about trying to meet people where they were at and explain wine that way, and really wanting, just like, it's just grape juice. Like, and when I say that, it's not like disrespectful. It's like, simplifying it, but still having respect for it, right?
Yeah,
that's why
totally.
I'm not a blender, right? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's like those kind of things, and that's kind of how it started. I don't even know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You just got me all. You asked me, I don't even know.
Well, I had a question. Because of, you are a huge influence in the wine industry. You do so much. How the fuck do you keep doing all this stuff? Like, what's your schedule like? How do you have peace of mind?
You got to delegate, right? And I say that with ease, but I have to tell you that, I had to pay somebody and lay on their sofa to work that shit out. Right.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was like, if I had to tell you twice, I might as well do it myself. And I was that person. I would like move 200 cases like before, and then go to service. Right. So it was just one of those things where I realized that you can have it all. I think a lot of people don't think that you can have it all, but you have to manage it all. You can have it all.
Yeah.
You don't have to manage it all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So for me, our restaurant group, we have a director of operations. Right. I talk to one person. And, you know what I mean? It's being able to manage it all. And we all have the same 24 hours. And it's just like where you want to dedicate yourself. I don't do any victory laps. It's really hard for me. I don't celebrate small victories. I don't celebrate any victories.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just keep going. Somebody asked me to do something. I was like, shit, you should have asked me 2 years ago. Let's do it. Let's check it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like,
totally.
Yeah. Like, and I think for some, people just see this part of my life, but I can remember, working at a restaurant and like life was going nowhere fast.
Yeah,
right.
totally.
And I remember those days. I used to put cocktail sauce on plates at Red Lobster.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean?
Starting from the bottom.
Yeah. And I remember just like, going out with the waiters, me realize like, well, shit, I'm just as smart as they are. Like I could wait tables. And, they were like, wow, like every night you're on your hands and knees and you're cleaning the wall and the trays. And I was like, yeah, because I want to experience every single moment of that.
Yep.
Never fucking doing it again.
Exactly. But you can say you've done it.
Correct. And by doing it, I know how long it takes, and I would never ask anybody to do something I won't. Like, I'm walking down the street, I'm like, yo, man, we're going to catch this motherfucker who doesn't clean up after their dog. Well, I'm going to go get a bag. Why don't you go get like a bucket?
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to clean up the dog shit with you. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, I'm above any of that. And I think just for me, it's just like, we just, I just realized like we're not here forever. And it's like, let's just go. And this is really what I want to be doing. Like, there's no joy for me sitting on a beach at all.
Yeah.
Right. My wife's like, you're miserable. Like, why don't you go back to the hotel? Right. I got sand in my ass and I can't see my, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel you.
You know what I mean? So for me, like, it's just one of those things. And like, I've dreamt about it and I thought about it. A lot of the ideas that I'm fortunate enough to present today are just same ideas that I had in 2004.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I look back at some of the labels. I designed those labels in 2008 and we just used them for a project in 2020.
That's
and so,
sick.
so just for me, it's just one of those things. It's like, this is it. And, there's a lot of that kind of shit. Like, so like, I wanted to play basketball for a living. I wanted to be in the NBA. And so I worked hard, thought I worked hard. And, for me, potential is a bad word. Like when I hear that, it's like, you could be good, but you're not good enough, like right now.
Yeah.
And I wasn't good enough. I played a little college and I realized that and I kind of let that go. And I always said, like, if I was ever good at something else, I would never, ever let it go. I would squeeze the life out of it.
Hell yeah.
And lo and behold, like this wine thing comes along by watching old episodes of Frasier, and I see that there's something to it, and that was it. And then you dig in, you're like, well, wait a minute, like there's a competition for this shit. Like,
yeah,
you get a whole, like, well, like it's like, hold on, I get to wear like suits, like expensive suits, and ties, and
get to be bougie,
watches, all that shit. And I was like, here. And like, and that was it. My mom was always like, well, baby, you work in a restaurant. You ain't supposed to go home hungry. You know what I mean? So it was like a way to like eat and drink above your pay grade. Yeah. But also I realized that, that it could really be this career for me. And that was it. And like, one thing leads to the next thing, leads to the next thing. And, showing up is 80% of it.
Yeah. The wine world is crazy.
Yeah, you can move pretty fast, and that was it. Even the restaurant, it was just like, I read a magazine one day, I saw these three people in this article, and I picked up the phone and called all of them. And I was awesome. Like, hey, somebody worked at Charlie Trotter. I was like, hey man, I would love to come stage with you guys. And they, that's something that they normally do in the kitchen, but they normally don't do in the front of the house. Right. And so I called them. I called Virginia Phillips, but she didn't answer. And then I called the only master sommelier in the state of Texas, this guy named Paul Roberts. And lo and behold, like I got to meet Paul, like just wild, like pulled up and they're like, oh, meet me in the back. He didn't even call. I never spoke to him. It was like through word of mouth of someone else. And he was like, okay, I got you in. Show up Thursday, 4:00, back door. I was like, all right. So I show up. I don't know what to expect. And I just remember we were walking down the stairs. This is a Thursday. He said on Monday, sorry, I couldn't get back to you. On Monday, I accepted the job to be the wine director for all of Thomas Keller's properties.
That's crazy.
You're the wine director for Thomas Keller's, all of his properties?
He was. So there was a position that didn't exist. They were expanding, and he became this thing. And he was in Texas. I was living in San Antonio. He was in Houston. And I just remember walking down the stairs and him telling me that. And then we were talking. He's like, hey, tell me about yourself, kid. Right? We're drinking espresso. Then I think a sales rep came, and now all of a sudden we're drinking margaritas out of Pinot Noir glasses. Right. And then he's like, hey, man, it's time to work the floor.
That's awesome.
So then I get up and he's like, no, bring your margarita with you. So
you're like, hell yeah.
And I worked the floor, and, it's easy. I just had learned the table number. So I knew, and I was familiar with some of the things on the list. And at the end of the night, he's like, hey, kid, I like you. I have to hire 6 sommeliers. Do you want to come to the French Laundry? And I was like,
Wow.
fuck yeah.
That's
And that was it.
crazy.
But to tell you the truth, I'm out, like, before I got out of the car, we pull up in the back and I was like, this is stupid.
Really?
I don't want to go. Yeah, I didn't want to go in. I had cold feet. I was like, this is so dumb. I don't want to do this. This is like blah, 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 blah.
And
just
look
by
at you now.
right, just by showing up, things happen.
Yeah.
Even when you don't want to. And that's
Don't
always
know
been
till
it.
you try.
That's how I built the company. That's all of that. It's just showing up.
That's crazy.
Wow.
So you, big news, you just went international with Bon Appetit. So I'd like to understand, because you don't exactly, for Bon Appetit, it's a magazine, right? And it's
Yeah.
So Bon Appetit magazine, yep.
and you contract with them?
Yeah, so
Okay.
so they're a magazine, and magazine, like, as they get out in the content world, they were a really shining example of how a magazine created this they created like this huge community, and basically it was the test kitchen. So where they were testing recipes and all that, they turned the cameras on their employees.
Okay.
And it was this huge thing. And so they big following, whatever. And then during the during the pandemic, they were looking to expand, and like wine wasn't a thing that most people would tell you didn't think that would work on those platforms.
Right.
Okay.
So they reached out to me, and I was like, all right, maybe. So, my thing is like, take the meeting. I took the meeting, and then it kind of like some of the ideas just felt kind of lame. I was like, I'm not doing that shit. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And I just remember they're like, well, what about just like reviewing wines under $15? And before I could say something, someone's like, do you even drink wine under $15? It's like, of course I do.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I was just kind of on the fence, and then I was like, hey, can I use emojis? And they were like, yeah,
I love it.
And I was like, sign me up. And that was it.
Hell yeah.
Because I
Okay.
use emojis in my book. And
Okay.
the publisher was like, nah, they just, it was just so funny. They made it like so difficult or whatever. And I just remember talking to the editor. Maybe she's listening. She says, well, Andre, like, where's the, you have a video game, you have this, you like have all this, this stuff. And like, I guess somehow she was bored with the book. And I just said, well, I gave you the $1 million idea.
Yeah.
It was emoji.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't think it was, right? But there we go. There it is, right?
Yeah.
It was the $1 million idea. And so we didn't end up using it in that. And then when Bon Appetit was like, hey, you could use this, you can use them. I was like, okay. Because wine, like when you start to think about it, wine is naturally about a feeling.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the way that we communicate it. It's a vibe, right? It's like how it makes you feel. I think is an easier way to explain to new people who come to wine. And so that's, it's like, well, how do they communicate with each other?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So let me communicate with them that way.
Yeah.
So you've been doing a lot of seminars recently, and I believe, if I'm following correctly, that you've been doing a lot of talk on like branding and marketing.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting, so like graphic design, like I didn't know it was this love for me, right? It's just so funny. So at Per Se, we do a pre-shift meeting, and like, so the chef has the menu, and then the front of the house. So the maitre d', they list like, talking points or whatever. And then the wine department had the back of that page. So we had one full sheet. And I would spend probably about 30 or 45 minutes doing page outlay on Microsoft Word, right? Because I didn't know how to use anything else. And so it had graphics and all kinds of stuff. And I just remember someone saying, wow, like, did you go to school for that? And I was like, no, I got kicked out of school. No, I didn't go to school for that. and that was the first time I heard someone say, oh, you're pretty creative. I just never thought about that.
Yeah.
And when it came time to finally, like, when the wine company came to fruition, like I just couldn't afford a designer.
Yeah.
And so I bought like about an old iMac on Craigslist for $200, and I just stared at the screen and taught myself how to use it. And so a lot of it, like what's been branching out, what's really cool is like, so I do a lot of graphic, I just delivered a keynote speech at a graphic design conference.
Okay.
And so it's like those kind of things I get to do. Like was in Canada, just giving a talk about myself. But within those conversations are talks about branding.
Okay.
right? And I didn't go to school for it, so it wasn't, I'm not like, oh, look at the colors and put all that. Like, all of it just came natural to me in a way
Yeah.
that, like, it was really hard for me to be able to explain it to other people so they could do it for themselves. So to me, it just felt natural to me, the progression and how I put those things together. And then to use the technology, like I really built this company in the early days of Facebook dark posts. So Facebook dark posts was the beginning of their advertising platform.
Okay.
Right. So I use that, and it was robust. Anything that started early was robust, and like it was pretty detailed. You could mark it down to a T. It almost felt somewhat illegal, and now they don't do some of those. But you could mark it to race. You could mark it to their employer. You could mark it down to the code.
Wow.
And a lot of things that we did is like we ran ads. So if I was going to Colorado Springs, I would run ads to Colorado Springs.
Okay.
And then people would be like, oh wow, like I saw that. People were used to it, but that's really how I built it. And so I talk a lot about that. And so somewhat design. So it's in all of those talks, it's not specifically on marketing, but a lot of that kind of falls within the parameters of telling my story.
Even for your book, I mean, I listened to a lot of books, and I did listen to your book, and so I feel like I actually already know you because I've been listening to you.
By the way, props for reading your own book for the audiobook.
That's amazing.
All right.
Huge detail that's important to a lot of people.
And the hard part was because I'm reading the book, like, so I'm reading.
Yeah.
So it's no personality. And what I really wanted to was to go off script. I'll go off script. Like, why the fuck? Like, I wanted to give somebody extra. I want to give somebody extra that thing.
Yeah.
This wasn't the cards. And so I do sound a little monotone in it. It was so funny because I just looked it up because I was like, oh, is it on Spotify? And it is. And so and so I was just like, oh, okay. But yeah, it was a really fun experience putting the book together. I felt was somewhat therapeutic way.
Yeah, I believe it was honestly how you placed it together and how you told your stories and how you would have this bottle of wine and pair it with that story. Honestly, for me, I mean, it shows back to the branding and marketing of just the side of your art. I mean, that's not generally what you see or listen to in a book. It's here's the chapter, here's the story, let's go on to the next chapter, here's the story. But you actually paired it with the wines and these experiences, which was, I thought was really, really fun and cool.
All right, let's take a break for a minute because Jazzy has got something to tell you.
All right, let's talk about it. So did you know we do have extra episodes on Patreon?
What?
And you can only get these for $5.
What?
Yeah.
Crazy.
I know.
Go.
So go to Patreon.
Link is in the description of the episode.
And subscribe. $5. You're supporting us and you're getting to learn more about the wine industry.
Let's go.
Woo! All right. Guess what? I think Ian has something to tell us.
I do. We got some merch going on right now. We got hoodies.
Say what?
We got handbags.
No way.
We got stickers.
What?
We got tank tops right now for the summertime.
Ooh.
Hell yeah. We got some windbreakers too. So go to
shit.
bungpod.store and get your Bung Pod merch.
Yeah.
Baby.
Like, wine is a placeholder of time, right? The reason why, you go on vacation, you're in Portugal, you're on the beach, you grab a 3-year-old bottle of Vinho Verde, and it's the most amazing. You're watching the sunset, you're with your people, and then you come back to the States and you're like trying to find that bottle.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
And a couple of years later, you find it and you're like, oh my God, like this is horrible. This doesn't taste the same. And then you're like, maybe it's in the bullshit in the United States, right? And it's everything else. It's the beach. It's all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was like, okay, with the book, it's like there's a connection to all of those stories. Those bottles were there, right? So when I talk about per se catching on fire, on the first day of service, that was a bottle of wine that I had open for a guest. So I opened it to can it. They ran late for lunch. So like what was happening was lunch had ended, and now we're doing the transition. So people were coming in, the employees were coming in, staff meal, all that stuff was happening. And I remember walking around the like into the service station, and I was like, oh man, it's like somebody's smoking crack. And like, they were like saying, I said, no, seriously, it smells like somebody's smoking crack. And they all paused for a long time. They're like, Andre, we don't know what crack smells like, right? Which is like, fair enough. And then I had to explain, it's like, oh, I grew up, in the crack era in Trenton, New Jersey. So like, you could smell it. They would be in the schoolyard, putting the fire to the glass, and you could see it flicker. Mm-hmm. Like I'd be sitting on the porch, but you could smell it, and it smelled. And then I was like, "Oh yeah, okay. It smells like an electrical fire, okay, guys." Yeah. And so, smoke started to billow through the vents and all that. And I remember I had grabbed the guest was like, "Oh, we're gonna leave." Before that, and then I grabbed the bottle. They like, "Here, give me the decanter." It's like, you enjoy it. And so I bought it back to the sommelier station, and everybody there was having family meal. And so when I think about that wine, I think about the fire. And so the concept was, how do I, tell my wine life story through these bottles.
Yeah.
And so
super cool.
Out of the book is, 99 bottles of Black Sheep's Guide to Life-Changing Wine. And so those are the wines that define my life. And part of the book is to encourage other people, what's your 99? What are the bottles that you remember that define your life, right? Like, and some of it was water. Some of them are really expensive wines. The first entry in the book is old, or your
San Pellegrino,
right?
Or the sparkling water.
Yeah. So yeah, San Pellegrino was like when I quit. But when I first got into that, it was Old English 800. And I talk about, I was a kid who was raised by hip hop and popular culture, right?
So
I think hip hop is the only genre of music that it's aspirational. It tells you what fashion, it tells you what car to drive, it tells you, how to wear your pants or your clothes. It actually even tells you what woman to be attracted to, right?
Yeah, it really does.
So it's that only genre of music that does that. So like you're listening to it and you're like, well, shit, Ice Cube drinks 40 ounces, right? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Obviously, I have to.
And then you're like, oh my God, this tastes like Ice Cube pissed on charcoal, right? So that was it. And so the book was really fun and like in a way and therapeutic of being able to go back and really like what you remembered and to be able to dive deeper into those stories. And so, and it made me relive like living in New York and just like my whole career, which, like I say, I don't do a lot of reflecting, right? Yeah. Because it's hindsight is 2020. So like, I think in a lot of those instances, out of fear, I'd be on the floor, curled up in the fetal position, right? Because you could clearly see where it went wrong. And so, so the book was really fun. And then we wanted to be, I don't take myself serious. So the idea is like, we wanted it to be like a wine guide. And so inside of that, you could learn, it's like, oh, what is Chateau Neuf du Pape? And then also I always felt like it was kind of like native learning, like reading it through the stories, you got an inside track into like how things worked in the restaurant, and how just, like how I got into wine. And so it was a really, really fun project for me. Looking back on it, it's like, oh, wow, okay, it was cool. But then I think of COVID, it didn't really, its growth was stunted in a way, right? Because, it came out in October, book tour, we did a little bit in the fall with a big push coming like in, the next quarter. And then it all got shut down because of COVID. Yeah. I'm working on my next book, which is great. I signed, but for when I'm here, it's it's the largest wine book advance in the history of publishing.
Oh, shit.
So we got a book coming out. It's called Thirst Trap, How to Love Wine Without Monogamy. And so, I'm really excited. It's more of a wine 101 book, which I said to myself I never wanted to do because I feel like, there's already definitive wine 101 books out there.
Yeah, right? And so, totally.
So, but then, you start to realize like, the thousands of the DMs I get each day are really just people asking the basic questions. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, so maybe it's the tone and which I talk about it that maybe we should, maybe you should do a book. So I'm excited and like we're working on that now. So it's been really fun.
Hell yeah.
That's awesome, man. I love
Yeah.
that. I love how you fuse, like, because I grew up in hip hop too, and I love how you fuse wine and hip hop together, because that's always been
He
two
brings
of
it
my
up like
biggest
every
passions.
podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
not that
a lot of time.
I'm here for the music, but I'm like, I can't remember even what I did today.
Yeah, I like sometimes when people don't when I try to explain who you are to some people, I'm like, he's kind of like the wine Jay-Z, like a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
He really is so.
it's just it's weird. And then you think of like how that like wine is now a big part of that culture of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, it's not, it was a really great article, where they were talking about, it's not about, for basketball players, it's not about the chain anymore. It's not about the car or the house. It's about what they can bring, and everybody trying to work with each other on the wine. And I think that's really cool. It's like, the idea, like, so iconically, culturally, like the barbershop, right? The fact that like
totally.
Brian has a show that he's in the barbershop, getting a haircut, and they're drinking 1990 Latour. Right? Like that, like, really like worlds colliding. For like really kind of cool to see. And then we've all kind of seen what happens when wine becomes part of popular culture. You look at Sideways. And just one scene, 45 seconds long, and it decimated, a particular grape variety.
Yep.
Right. And then elevated Pinot Noir in that way. And you really got to see that. And even like think about rosé, the fat Jewish, with that, how rosé at some point, I think it's imploded a little bit, but let's call it 5 years ago, rosé was larger than wine as a category.
Yeah.
And that, like you think of like, producers that had never made rosé, and then their first vintage, they come out and they make 45,000 cases.
Yeah.
Right. So it became this big thing and part of popular culture. And I'm anxious to see where wine goes as it continues to kind of go down that path.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of the wine, I know Ian had a couple questions about your winery in Oregon and that whole area.
I mean, also, I just kind of want to have you explain a little bit of this wine, of the new Noir to us, because back of label, it says Oregon
Love the back
white
label.
Wine. So
what's in it?
What's in it? And I think I have a little bit of a guess of a large quantity of Pinot Gris, possibly. So my guess is some Pinot Gris, just because of the color, and I think it's probably like a skin fermented.
Are you drinking the same thing?
No, I'm drinking something else.
Oh.
We didn't have anything. It looks close enough. So it is it's our skin contact Pinot Gris. There's some Gewürztraminer in it.
Nice. I was gonna say Gewürztraminer.
And there's a little bit of Pinot Blanc as well.
Okay.
And so I originally made this wine in 2020, and skin contact, and so it looked orange. So the two vintages that I've made, one looks orange, and the other one looks Ramato style this way.
Yeah.
And so I'm honest, right? I fucked up. I let the wine sit on the skins too long, and then
life happens.
Due to some miscommunication, it was bottled, and now so now there's all this clamoring. People are like, "When's the next finish?" All this other shit, but they're expecting something that looks totally different. Right? There's something that looks orange, and I'm like, "Fuck." And so and I guess like how I attacked everything, it's like you just own up to it and you just roll. And so what we end up doing is, if you look at that label, there's on the top right, it says late. There's a stamp on it on the front label. On the front.
On the front. I don't see a
stamp. I don't see
on
anything.
You don't see anything on it? Oh, maybe they gave you. We shipped you. It didn't have any wax on it?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So because we pay people to wax it, we don't wax it all at once because we made a whole bunch, and it cost me $50 an hour. So what we basically, if you look at it, we bought these stamps from Amazon that said late.
Okay.
And we just every single label that says late, and that differentiated this wine from the next wine. And then I had to go out and tell the story that I messed up. I waited too long.
I mean, you might have waited too long, but it doesn't taste like phenolically bitter. So like when I think of leaving on the skins too long,
the
especially
wine,
for an orange wine.
is sound, and that's why I didn't like, if it was bitter, then I wouldn't even put it out, right?
Yeah.
Like the wine tastes great to me, but it wasn't what people thought it should look like and what it would continue to. And so this is a one-off. Like I fucked up, so I'm just gonna put this on. I'm gonna put the sticker on it, and that was it. And so it's been well received, and we'll move back to how it's supposed to look. But that was just kind of it. And so for me, like, so new noir, it's like orange is the new black.
Yeah.
Right? That's what.
Well, and honestly, so you're telling me like I have an OG bottle right here. Like this is very unique.
Well, the orange one. Like, so this one, these are the collector's items in some ways because once it's done, it's over.
Yeah.
And then 2024 will look orange like the others.
Okay.
But it's just one of those things that it's one of those things where you just pivot. Like I'm just honest. Like I think one time, like I saved some money and I bought bottles from China and they weren't sterile, and basically the wines all started to re-ferment in the bottle.
Yeah.
Thought my life was over. Thought my company was over. But we narrowed it down, and I called everybody and I said, "Hey, look, I said to them exactly what I said to you.
Yeah.
I said, I'm sorry, and we'll go ahead and recall those." And I had to soothe all that over, but I thought it was all over. But for me, it's just like, approaching everything with, being authentic. And that's it. That's all I can ask.
And that's one thing I totally respect about you, because, a lot of time in the wine world, especially with the podcast we've currently been having, is a lot of people say what good they've done. Like, this is what I've seen, this is what I've done. But you know what? I want to hear how you fucked up, especially when we're winemakers and we're like, I work mostly in the tasting room or out in the vineyard. And you know what? We're human. We fuck up. It's okay. Totally. But like, people need to understand, like, mistakes happen. And I appreciate that you even can say that and be real with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of it is, I think, what has gotten me this far in life is being honest and authentic and generous.
Yeah, totally. So do you still also have the wine shop?
Yeah, we have the wine shop. Yeah. So we have about 8 food businesses here in Brooklyn. And so the idea was I wanted to be part of the legendary restaurant landscape of New York. And I wanted a bar. I wanted a wine bar. I did. Like, I've been here, like, I just want a bar. Like, if I wasn't traveling, this is where you could find me. And so I had moved my family we had moved to Lyon for 4 months for like language immersion for my 2 boys. Yeah. And in 2016. And then also we were kind of trying on as a family, like if my family was going to live there for 6 months out of the year. And I mean, it didn't matter to me. It's like, I'm in New York. I need to go to work. It's 6 hours west. I need to go see my family. It's 6 hours east. And so I just remember at the end, just, the experience of like eating there in restaurants. When we came back, I was like, listen, like, nobody's going anywhere. Like, we're going to open a bar. And so I had signed the lease in at the beginning of 2017. It took me 3 years to open this bar that's like, 400 square feet. So basically, and to be honest with you, for a lot of contractors and people in New York, it just, it was just too small. Like, most people's get out of bed price, $250,000. I was like, the whole project is $65,000, right? Yeah. And so in the meantime, I guess what happened is I'm competitive and somewhat vindictive in a lot of ways. So I was selling wine in LA, and I had like this really kind of weird and somewhat horrible experience selling wine at this wine shop, where I felt like the person was condescending and weird, and I don't walk in saying anything, right? I'm not like I'm saying I'm a big deal or anything, right? Like, I'm just
very humble.
Yeah, I'm thankful of your time. We present the wines and we let the wines speak for themselves. We could talk about the wines. And I just remembered walking out of there feeling like I could do this better than this person. Yeah. And I had some friends who owned a store in my neighborhood that wasn't getting much traction. And I called them like before I even got in the car. And I said, hey man, are you still looking to sell? And if you are, I'm your guy. And then I met with them next week. And so I bought the store in 2019. In April of 2019. And so it's just been a really fun experience and kind of like right on scale or ahead of the curve in the way that a lot of restaurants, you're kind of not a real restaurant group now, hospitality group, unless you have a wine store. So the idea is like you have a restaurant, you have all these loyal people that trust you with the wine selection. Like, why wouldn't they buy wine from you at retail? And so it was just really fun. And the wine store is like 200 square feet.
Okay.
But it's all in my neighborhood. And so during the pandemic, we just kept expanding. And so we still have that. And that's been really fun and really awesome to be able to provide these things inside of my neighborhood, right? Where I feel like I was going outside of my neighborhood to get some of these things and to be able to have that and build that and it's all on this one street here. It spans like 7 blocks. But yeah, so I still have that. And the restaurant is like cool, like for me, it was like, I was fascinated with these antique meat slicers, and that's kind of how it started. I bought and then I had, it was Pamp, I had it at the crib, I named it Kimbo Slice. And
Love that.
like, it was just awesome. And then I was like, and then really, we would entertain, my last trip, I would travel like almost every single week. And then like, I think my last like trip was always around like right before Thanksgiving. So it was like November 19th. And so we would start to entertain like, all the way through the holidays. And then, the bar just became really an extension of our home. And so it was really fun. And then thematically, it was just like, I want to celebrate country hams. And so it's the largest selection of country hams in one place at 15, give or take. Have some black market ones authentic. So, and it's all American cheese, and it's all American wine back to the 60s.
Cool.
And so it's a really fun place, I think, to drink. And like some of the greatest value in wine today is old American wine. And so funny because some of the stuff is not the stuff that most people would think, like, when you said collectible wine, I mean, I just bought a whole bunch, but like we can't even get Kenwood Jack London. So Kenwood Jack London Vineyard, we bought Cabernet and we have it from 1985. We sell it for probably $85 on the list. And it's just amazing, right?
Yeah.
And that there's really no market for that. Like they're not people buying that wine at auction. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
So it's just been a real, you know what I mean? So it's not an auction market for it. And it's really great. And I think, the idea of introducing people into, drinking older wine takes some experience to, everybody thinks that it's supposed to be, that it's going to be big and bold and jammy, like how current release is. And so it's just been really awesome to be able to do that. I think the wine list is like 700 selections. And it's just all old American wine, which is, and then by the glass, we kind of have like some of the new young guns. But it's been really remarkable. I was just in Atlanta. Someone came up and they were like, "Oh my God, like we were at your place and we had, 1976 Petite Syrah." And he was like, "That one's amazing." And so there's something really fun about that. And like, and it's a place that it doesn't exist anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And it's in my neighborhood. And like, I thought that, so for me, it's like really fun. And then we just kind of built around that, I have a bakery. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. So when I'm feeling homesick, breakfast tacos is my jam. And so the idea was like, let's do breakfast tacos and, and connect the dots. It's like my worlds collide. And I grew up, putting tortillas in the microwave, store-bought tortillas. We bought a stone mill. We mill our, 80% of our grain. We press them to order. And, we're the largest purchaser of Benton's, but, we use Benton's bacons, farmstead cheeses, and organic, organic eggs. And so it's just been really like a fun thing, a kind of, culinary worlds kind of collide in that. And so it's like that, I have a seafood restaurant. I just bought into a pizza place, some New York style pizza. And so it's just, that part has been really, really fun for me.
Yeah.
And so that's what I spent the pandemic doing.
Good. That's awesome. I know before we started this podcast, we were actually talking about going into a wine shop here in Chelan. It's a very small town. So, it's definitely and it's an expensive town is really where I should say. But yeah, and then we started the Bung Pod and here we are. So,
Awesome.
Another thing I wanted to bring up was you went to Oregon, not because of the Pinot Noir, but because of the Chardonnay. And what was your question? It was...
Yeah, I mean, how would you compare your experience with Oregon Chardonnay to your experience with Burgundy?
Actually, so it's the other way. I actually did go to Oregon because of because of Pinot Noir.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
For some reason,
Yeah,
I
But
know.
also same question, but for Pinot Noir.
So the idea was like any great wine list that I had a hand in building and being a part of, that really kind of bookend on red and white Burgundy. And so that was like a first love. And then, I didn't really have the gumption to like try to do something in France or anything like that. I was just like, I want to do something domestically here. And where I felt like people were doing cool stuff with Pinot Noir was Oregon. People talked about, oh, Russian River, all that, but I was just like, Oregon to me seems like the place to be. I want to be there. And actually, that was part of the wine list that I really like kind of delve into. I think a lot of times, like in those big wine lists, as a buyer, you want to put your mark on it. And so for us, it was like, for me, it was really growing the Willamette Valley Pinot Noir section. And so I got to really know a lot of the producers, become familiar with it. And then we also had family there, like on my wife's side, her mother's side of the family. And so, we would go every now and then, just like, it's just that crazy thing, stars aligned. Somebody we had met of the restaurant, he was buying some of the great vineyards in America. He bought the Occidental Vineyard that Kistler made famous in California. He bought Seven Springs Vineyard, which was one of the most famous vineyards in America. And I think, that property was actually split in half because of divorce. He got both halves back together, signed like this Hong Kong lease, a 99-year lease. Because he needed to kick everybody out, which made people in Oregon angry because they just had handshake deals. And so I just remember running to him on the street, like on 57th Street. And he's like, oh, like, hey kid, like, how's it going? Last time I talked to you, you were like going to make wine, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh yeah, I got a couple projects in Napa. And then he said, well, you should call Gretchen, my assistant. She'll get you a ticket. And I came out to go check it out. And that was it. And that's kind of how I got there. And so while being there, what I did witness through Seven Springs, through Evening Land, was this like evolution of Chardonnay, which was just like remarkable. When you really think about white wine from Oregon, first things that come to mind are Pinot Blanc and Pinot Gris, and that's easy, right? The early settlers there were of Germanic influence, and that's what they planted. When it came time to plant Chardonnay, we called our good friends down at UC Davis in California, and we're like, hey, like we need some Chardonnay, and they provided and gave us the Winty clone, which is a late ripening clone that's more fundamental to the climate in California and not to Oregon. So a lot of times, we had made shitty Chardonnay. It was always flabby. And there was like some microclimates. I think Bethel Heights really kind of thrived. They did like 50-50, so it was like they did 50 Winty clone and 50 like Dijon clones. But I think when the Valley got hip and started planting Dijon clones, things changed. And it was like, trying to think of what vintage. I think it was 2007 Evening Land Chardonnay that I think was on the cover of the Wine Spectator, like really kind of changed the game, where people were like I remember taking the Chardonnay to some people, some prominent people, and asking, something about, is this a good, Oregon Pinot Noir? I mean, Oregon Chardonnay. And they were like, this could be in the running for the best Chardonnay in the world. And so that's kind of how how you saw that kind of happening. But like Chardonnay, and so we make a stainless steel Chardonnay, and then we do like a single vineyard Chardonnay. And I think it's like it's my mom's favorite. She's like, yeah, where's that yellow top? I want the yellow top. But it's been remarkable to be able to see that, and now and like you've made it because now we have like our own Chardonnay conference, or or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's a little bit different in the way of like, in the way that it's somewhat that I would explain Oregon Pinot Noir, like being like the best of both worlds, right? Yeah. It does have some of that fruit that you associate with California, but then it has the terroir taste of the land that you find in Burgundy, right? So the minerality, so it has the minerality, the acid, all of those things, but less, but with a little bit more fruit, and depending on what producer and how they're using oak. But I was really privileged in a way that, I got to work with, Dominic Lafon, and, who I really regard, and the world kind of regards as probably one of the best white wine makers in the world. Yeah. A friend of mine had contracted him, and he was consulting on the project there. And so it was just a really interesting way to look at it. And then to get some insights and, to be able to use, some of his secret toast barrels and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
it's just been a really fun, remarkable thing. I think when I first started, Seven Springs was expensive. And so I remember, making a couple barrels coming back to New York to sell them, and, and how it all washed out. They were $80 a bottle wholesale. So
Shit.
like there was some margin,
Yeah.
but not a lot.
Yeah.
You sell out of it. I pat myself on the back, but I still pick up bartending shifts because I have to pay a mortgage. And that's why I realized, like, I really want to speak to a younger audience about wine, and I don't think that you could do that at that price point. And so that's what changed. And also just understanding that, a revenue center for a restaurant, but for the wine program is the wine by the glass. And so that's what I really focused on, wanting to make wine by the glass, that were a little bit higher in acid, right? The acid is that lifeline. So they could stay open a couple of days earlier, and there was margin built in for them that they could actually make money. And that, like, knowing the business on that side felt like it helped me in a way to be able to talk real business fire, right? Like, we can all talk about wine and it's great. And I feel confident that that this wine hits on that mark. Now let's talk business. Like, let's talk about P&L, right? Because that's really what your job is about, right? Like, you can memorize all the regions in the Loire, but like, you'll get fired if your numbers aren't right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that was the thing. It's like, hey, like you can make money with this. And I understood that. And it's like, so specifically for everyday luxury wines are meant to be by the glass. And just so happened on the retail, which I didn't understand, it fell under $25.
Yeah.
And so that all worked out for me in that way.
Okay, so now that you brought up the younger generation, this has actually kind of been a topic that we've talked about a couple times.
Yeah.
And
I was actually going to bring up the same question.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Okay. So, you have a Club W that is kind of targeted to the new generation, but we've been talking about how the upcoming generation is being affected.
Yeah.
Did I word that correctly? I feel like
with the new generation coming out, this question is there's a lot of I guess there's a lot of ways you can go with it. There's branding, there's marketing, there's winemaking styles. There's also alternative vessels like pouches, boxes, or screw caps or cans. But for the new generation, especially like with your Club W, how are you trying to target the new generation, especially with the
so Club W has transformed into Wink, and I kind of like parted ways with that. I'm not part of that anymore. But I could just tell you the premises on it. It was just like making wine fun and accessible at a different price point. Yeah. And it was more it was called Club W, and it was the wine club.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it morphed into, right, because when you really think about it, people aren't acquiring wine clubs for $300 million.
Oh, hell no.
They're acquiring brands.
No.
Within that, we were making our own brands and that kind of thing. And so that was what was cool. To me, if I had to explain it, it was kind of like Urban Outfitters of wine, right? When you looked at the label, to me, they kind of like looked like the T-shirts, right?
Yeah.
When you walk into the T-shirts, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was just talking to people in a different way. So I think like Summer Water was their brand. And I think that was a big breakout for them that really rode the wave of rosé. And I think so price point and the way they talked about wine and how wine was, I think, was a really great thing. I think how, personally, how I look at it now is being able to communicate with people at different levels about wine, right? Making it more accessible in a way of like not less intimidating. And I think, for me, where the fun creative part comes, is somewhat in the labeling and in the message. And you see that, like, it's so funny because, people, they poo-poo and they say marketing, but like, so if I put the shit in the brown bag, that's still marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so like you keep
totally.
it around and people talk about it as being a bad word, but like, I don't think so. Like, even like, if you were talking about orange wine, natural wine, that's marketing. Yeah. Like the fact that you decide to do that or whatever, there's marketing in all of it. Right. So like, I get it when people talk about being overly marketed. But I think, a younger, it's kind of like the same thing. They want to make sure that what they're drinking is real. So people talk about additives and all that kind of stuff. But like, people just want to believe in what they're drinking. Part of some of it is interesting to me because, I think we always romanticize about other countries. Like I hear people talking about like, they don't take the wine to the lab. And I'm like, well, they couldn't afford to take the wine to the lab. You know what I mean? Like, so it's some of that stuff. But like, I'm psyched about all of it. I think a lot of people are like, oh, what do you feel about natural wine? And it's like, well, to be honest with you, there's nothing natural about wine, right? Like if you just let grapes sit there, they don't become wine, right? So like in that thing, like, talking about low intervention, I understand that. I understand why people are into that, and that's cool. As a good friend of mine says, if it's good, I want to drink it, right? I'm part of the good wine.
Yeah.
But you're ready. I'm allowing other, I'm giving grace to everybody else. Like if this is how you got here, that's great. And what's interesting from like my journey is like, the American palate has become a little bit more sour.
Yeah.
Right. American palate is sweet. And so, we invented the cocktail to cover up shitty booze. Right.
Yeah.
So like during Prohibition, right? Like when you really think about it, like, think about your favorite Clint Eastwood movie. He rolls into town, kicks the saloon doors open. He walks up to the bar, he tells the bartender, he's like, slaps a coin or a sack on the thing. He's like, whiskey.
Yeah.
The bartender back there, like he doesn't have a wax mustache with armbands on and shaking anything, right? Comes back and puts the bottle of whiskey in a shot glass and puts it on the bar.
Yeah.
Is that the real history of cocktails? I had no idea.
So like
I had no idea either, but that's amazing.
Right. So Prohibition, they had all these speakeasies and all that. And so they had all this bootleg, like, alcohol, and it wasn't good. So that's where they think about it. They're adding fruit flavor, like that kind of stuff, flavoring and sweetness.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
So when you think about that, and so what you've kind of witnessed is, this kind of evolution as they're starting, like it comes back a little sour. Like think of the rise of kombucha.
Yeah, totally.
Sour beer.
Yeah.
And you think about those groups, right? And then that leads you, if you want wine, a lot of those people come to wine through natural wine.
Yeah.
And so like I'm here to welcome everybody to the party. I could care less how you got here, and I think it's great. And if that's what brought you to wine, then that's cool. And that's it. And the more people that we have drinking wine, I think it's great. And so, less of the dogma. And there's bullshit. If like if you say natural wine and then you say the now natural wine, or like whatever that, there's people who make bullshit in that segment, and there's people who make bullshit in the other segment. Right?
Yeah.
And it's you do it and you figure out what you like, and that's right. And I think that's what's cool and fun about all of it in a lot of ways. It's just cool, like to see, like, it's like all of a sudden someone's like, hey, do you like these wines? And it's like, is that people are like, oh, I drink this because they give me headaches and it's all this other shit. But like, right. I don't care. And a lot of it is probably not true or whatever. But like the idea of it, I think like it's just cool. Like you're just seeing more people into wine, and I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're the same way. I mean, we started this podcast because we love wine a lot. I didn't like the pretentiousness of wine when I first started. And honestly, hearing you talk, and also the winemaker I was working with at the time, really cut down of like the bougie, pretentiousness. And I was like, okay, well, I can actually access this. And so that was like my journey into it. And hearing you talk on different podcasts and everything you've done really helped me access wine in that way. And that's what our podcast is supposed to be doing as well.
Adding everybody.
Exactly. Yeah.
Love it. Like create the world that you want to live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make it more relaxed. Like we're all here for the same thing.
Yeah. And when I saw the label OPP, I was like, holy shit, this is my guy.
And I think like to me, it was just like one of those things that like constantly in my life, it's like, how do I fuse those things in my life, right? Like, like I said, I always say, like, I'm a kid who like was raised on hip hop, punk rock, and skateboarding, and then fell in love with wine. And like, how do I put those and fuse those things together? And OPP was interesting because we were, like I said, I was making this wine in Seven Springs, and we were leasing space inside of another winery, and it's like $80, right? So I'm like, oh shit, like I need to figure out something. And then we purchased 8 barrels of finished wine from that winery that we were leasing. And when we moved into the new facility, we just always, those barrels were marked as OPP because I didn't make the other people, And then so we blended that in with wine that I made from Seven Springs that brought the cost down. And OPP was just a Band-Aid, right? Like it looked, I just said, fuck it, I'm gonna make it look like my 4-year-old did it and we're just gonna roll. Right? Because I couldn't afford, I think it was, graphic designer was like $25K. And I was like, well, shit, I don't have $25K for glassware, glasses, corks, labels, any of that shit.
Yeah.
And so that was it. I was like, and then also like, I don't understand part of that business where I had signed up for the bottling line, but I didn't have TTP approval. And so somebody came back, what the fuck are you doing? I was like, well, huh? What's happening? I don't know. So we did OPP and I was like, okay, what, like one off. Like that's my thought. And like, we'll change the label, fix it the next time. And then it just kind of stuck. And then also it kind of like morphed into that whole thing of like, to me, it's just more inclusive of all the people that have a hand in making it, from the people who are on our bottling team, the people who are on our picking team, all of those things, a lot of those people work there, but they're not spending $40 on a bottle of Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For a lot of the stuff that they have a hand in making and building, behind the scenes, they can't actually afford those wines that they make. And to me, this was a homage to them. This, it used to be, price has gone up. It used to be $20.
Yeah.
Right. That they could enjoy something that they were a part of, to me, like made me feel special in a way that was like, okay, great. And that was it. It was like, okay, we're just going to go with OPP, other people's Pinot, and the back label, as you guys know, the back label is the front label. So it's called other people's Pinot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And with me knowing that this business is litigious, people are like, how do you get away with that? It's like, well, you can't trademark an acronym, right? So it's like, so like, and I always tell people, well, OPP could mean a lot of different things to people. This is other people's Pinot, but if you're from, Ontario, it's Ontario Provincial Police. If you're from Orleans, it's Orleans prison, right? And so and that's the kind of thing, like the idea of like, piquing your interest, like OPP, what? Like what's going on here? You're like catching people's attention in a way, and the black and white design really just kind of came through. Yeah. I'm pretty old. I'm dating myself here, but like when we would go shopping, when you would go to the grocery store, the grocery stores didn't have their own brands like that, like where they had their own branding, like Sacred of the Lakes or whatever it was. There was an aisle called the generic aisle. And so when we would go, like, we're a military family. So, you did like that one shop a month. So you went down every single month, took forever. And every time you would go down an aisle, it's like a mosaic of colors, right? You see it everywhere. And then you turn down this one aisle and it's just stark white. And so everything is white and then it has black font on it. So it'll be 6-pack of cans, all white, and it'll just say beer on it. Bags just say and say peanut butter on it. And I just remember that, like, and kind of the things like, so how do you stand out when you walk down a wine aisle? Yeah. It's like all this mosaic of colors. Yeah. And how do you stand out? And like, that was it. And then also like, we're talking about Mouton Noir. It's like, it fit, right? It's black and white. Yeah. Right? So we do these black and white simple labels. And that whole idea is like, we don't take ourselves serious, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what we do in the wine is, and that's kind of the whole idea of like, we could pay the $25,000. So for the designer, so we didn't have to jack up the price. Right.
That's funny that you bring up like, the whole concept of like, we're not serious, but we still make quality wine, because where I work, it's called Hard Red Ho. And then, but they make great wine. And I mean, it's all based on this brothel up lake and all this fun stuff. But it's that same concept though, of just.
Yeah. The thing is like, it's like, having a sense of humor and you would think like a serious place like the French Laundry and per se. Yeah. I tell people a lot of times, like the chef has a really amazing sense of humor, right? Yeah. And then I have to preface that, well, he's not back there in the kitchen cracking jokes and slapping his knee, right? And that his sense of humor really comes through on the menu. So you think like you're spending all of this money, right? It's really expensive. And then you sit down and there's all these quotes. And like, so we actually had, there was a menu item called tongue in cheek, which was tongue in. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it actually consisted of tongue and cheek. Right. And so it's that way in which he had a sense of humor that really like allowed me to lean into my own. And especially when I thought about, wines and like having like, I've always felt like the greatest foil to pretension is humor.
Yeah.
Right. And if we can laugh at it ourselves and all those things, it kind of takes away a lot of that tension. And I feel like that was one of the ways that I wanted to approach wine was through humor and through like this kind of thing that's fun, this very serious thing that's fun. And then, and you got to be careful with that. Like critter wine under $20, that's different,
Right.
A sense of humor in a way that's playful. And I thought that was really cool. That kind of let people bring down their guard, and that was it. And and then also the whole thing of like all of it, like Mouton Noir, all this other thing. I'm generally, the last person that when I walk into a room, people think I'm the last person that knows anything about wine. Yeah. And I actually like that. They don't see me coming. Yeah. Right. You know what I mean? And it goes back to this thing of like, you can't judge a book by its cover. So you look at these wines with these very simple labels, but they're complex, they're flavorful, well made. And I think they over deliver for the price point that they're at. And that's the part where I talk about like, it's in like what we're all talking about. The reason why the company was named what it was is just that, is to strip away all the pretense. Yeah. Right. And and I'm a walking example of that, right? Just when I walk in, some people are like, "Can I help you, sir?" It's like, "No, I'm here to show the wines." Yeah. And they can't believe it. They're like, "What do you mean?"
It's so funny because I have I'll have a lot of 21-year-olds being at the winery that I am. And I tried to give them a basic lesson of how to taste. And when I do it, I go at the end, I'll go, even as young as you are, if you start getting your palate right, and then when you go into the big wine industry, you could probably turn on any big CEO by the way that you talk about wine. Yeah, so absolutely. If you learn now, they'll never see it coming, but they'll be very impressed.
No, and that's it. And like you become more confident by drinking, understanding your palate. Yeah. If that's what you want to do, right? For some people, it's like, hey, I just want to sip wine and not fucking think about it. Cool. Yeah. And I'm all for that too. Yeah. And, it's like, but I get it. It's one of those weird ways where you have to, it seems like you have to come with all this knowledge and then enjoy it. It's all weird. It's like, so why do wines have tasting notes, but cocktails don't? Yeah. But think about cocktails, just a list of ingredients. But nobody has any questions. But all of a sudden, like everybody thinks wine is so like it's complicated. Like when someone's like, "Well, I don't know what I smell." I was like, "Well, what the fuck do you smell in like a Paloma or a margarita?" Right? You know what I mean? Like,
I've never even thought about that.
So, and just think like those are like classic cocktails where generally someone's had them before and they kind of know what to taste. Mm-hmm. But when you think about like the stuff that when you go to a cocktail bar and they mix all kinds of shit up, you're like, there's a list of ingredients and that's it. There's no tasting about what it's supposed to taste like or what you can expect. But somehow where wine becomes, and like we made our own bed in that way, the wine industry in that way. But like it's trying to like help people put their guard down and like, what do you taste? Like there's no wrong answer. Taste it. Almost do you like it? Like no one says when you're drinking cocktail, like, so what do you taste? What do you taste?
I honestly have never even thought about that.
Yeah, and so I just try to break it down in a more practical way for people to say, like, it doesn't have to be that way. It's like, do you like it? First and foremost, who gives a shit about anything else? Yeah. Right? Do you like it? Right? If you like it, you don't like it. And then also, like, somebody says, well, I like it all. And I said, okay, well, great. And then the thing is, like, just understanding that, like, now tasting different wines from different places. And that's why I talk about, in my opinion, wine is not this race to find a soulmate. Yeah. And you know what I mean? Something you want to be with the rest of your life. Like wine is just cool in a way that like, hey, I'm going to the oyster bake, so I'm going to bring these wines. Hey, we're going to a barbecue, I'm going to bring these wines, right? Like the idea that like the situation can dictate what wines you bring, and then having some of the favorites within that category. And that's what I want people to understand, and that's what's fun. It's like, kind of dressing for the occasion, right?
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yep. Totally. Yep. I love it. So cool. Another quick question that I had. You had a wine that was known as E = MC squared. Yep. Was that part of your first label?
Yeah, so that was I actually designed that label on
and I was wondering really the name too.
Yeah, so it was, and so what that was really it was going to be a collaboration between me. So a mentor of mine, his name is Mac McDonald.
Okay.
And so my last name is Mack, so that would be E equals MC squared. So MC short for Mack squared too. E evolution. I think that's what we had called it. And so that was just kind of a concept that like I really wanted to do. And so from that concept, and then I when I left the restaurant, I left the restaurant to go make wine. And so that was kind of one of the things. And then I started this, I came along on this project and started a distribution company here in New York with some other partners. And so from that idea of E equals MC squared, we came up with Relativity Vineyards. And that became a private label brand that we made within that company. And so, but that the original idea was about me and my mentor making wine. And Mack, I remember, I was in San Antonio, and there was an article, and it was talking about African Americans in the wine business. Yeah. And they talked about it like being like a unicorn. Yeah. And I remember, and like there's no social, so I remember I wrote an email to the editor, and basically saying, I am that fabled creature that you seek. Yeah. And so it talked about like that, like me being in the industry when I thought about it, and then I reached out to Mac McDonald, and it was really funny because I just remember, he's so great. I just remember like every 5 minutes he goes, "You're black, right?" I go, "Yeah, I'm black." It was really funny. And like it was interesting, and like I try to tell a lot of people, like, when you don't see anybody that looks like you, you don't think it's for you. And, and I think fortunately for me, I wasn't brought up that way. Like, I think like for me, my mom always instilled like, you can do anything. And I was dumb enough to believe her. Right. But that I think for a lot of people, that's true. And so, here was a person who was doing something that I didn't know that I could do. I was a sommelier, and that kind of gave me hope. And, I would talk to him, then I'd talk more than I'd talk to my own father. Yeah. And then like it's like something about it. Like I hadn't told him that I was moving to Napa, and I the first day I show up, the first day he calls me. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing, buddy?" And I thought that he knew I was there, and I was about to say, "How do you know I'm here?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I just pulled up to Dina DeLuca." And he goes, "Where?" I go, "Here in Napa." He goes, "What?" I said, "I thought you knew." He goes, "No, I didn't know." He's like, "Where are you staying?" I said, "Well, they put us up in a hotel." He's like, "Nope, you're gonna stay with me." So anyways, it was just like this. Fun. That was the idea and concept. I was still working in the restaurant for the Eagles, and then it never really came to. This was after I met him. This was before I met him, right? And so like that was kind of how our relationship started, and that was it. And so Eco with MC Squared was kind of like acknowledging his impact and influence over me, and wanting to have a project together, which we never did. But it did lead to something else that kind of, that gave me the courage to continue to do it. I always think that like, through life, it's all stepping stones, right? It's like this thing, the next thing that gets you the next thing, that gets you the next thing, that prepares you for the next thing. And so kind of like, somewhat of a never ending story, but like that is life. And so and that was it. So E equals MC squared, that idea.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was fun.
All right. I think we're about out of time right now. Okay. Thank you so much. Hey, if anything that you want to plug, please do now, and we'll put it down in the show notes. I'm
plugging the Bung hole. No, the Bung. Actually, that didn't sound right. Anyways.
Bung Pod, yeah.
No, that's kind of why we named it
the Bung Podcast. Yeah.
Yes.
That's why we named it that.
We appreciate it.
There you go.
Yeah. Check the show notes for all of Andre Mack's stuff he's got going on. We're gonna put all the links in there.
So many things.
Thank you so much for coming on the pod, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. This was a great time.
Thank you. We need to do our great cheers.
Yeah, give me some wine.
Need a little bit more in my glass. This is awesome, by the way.
Yeah, this is phenomenal.
This is New Noir. Go get the New Noir, guys. Cheers.
Awesome. Cheers.
Cheers.
My glass empty. That's bad luck, but I'm with you guys.
We respect it. Thanks, man.
Thank you again. Hey, you, now that I have your attention and you've listened to this wonderful podcast that we had to offer, we'd like you to scroll down. And what are they going to do when they scroll down, Ian?
Scroll down and give us some feedback. Rate us on your podcast platform, ideally 5 stars. And if you would give us some critical feedback, you can DM us on Instagram at officialbungpod.
Let's hear it.
Let's go. It is only 2 of us writing the show, 2 of us producing the show. It's me, Ian King, Jasmine Shattuck, and
The lovely Becca Hines
as our producers. And our writers are me, Ian King, and
Jasmine Shattuck.
let's go.